Joining from oh. Hi everybody, we're going to start. Welcome. We're joining from across the globe, which is so amazing, and you can even see in the chat box all the way from California to Myanmar. It's like extraordinary. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and for those of you in the global south, we really appreciate you staying awake to be with us right now. So thank you all for joining us. So my name is Ilana Haviv, and I'm the founder and executive director of Generation Human Rights. And today we're honored to be joined by two extraordinary speakers, Stephanie Heimann, photo director at the New Republic, and Ron Haviv, award-winning photojournalist. And yes, Ron is my brother, so I want to make sure that the nepotism is fully transparent. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge Christy Rodelas Palmer from HRE USA for co-sponsoring this event, and our incredible interns, Austin Emery, who's going to be running tech, and Madison Fitzpatrick, whom I will soon pass the mic to. You know, I rely on the words and images shared by those on the front lines in order to make sense of the world beyond what I can see. They're my eyes, and I'm deeply grateful for their work. And on that note, I'm going to pass the mic to Madison.
Hello, everyone. I'm Madison Fitzpatrick. Thank you again for being here. Today, we have the opportunity to hear from two incredible speakers, Stephanie Heimann, the photo director of the New Republic, and a veteran visual editor specializing in politics, global issues, and the environment, as well as Ron Haviv, an Emmy-nominated filmmaker, award-winning photojournalist, and co-founder of the Seven Foundation, whose work on conflict and human rights issues has appeared worldwide, helping shape global conversations. As a part of this presentation, we will be seeing four stories published by the New Republic from January 6th, 2021 to January of this year. The first story we will be looking at was published a day before Alex Preddy was killed in Minneapolis on January 24th. In the first video that we will be seeing, Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino yells, "Gas is coming," before unleashing a green chemical agent on protesters in Minneapolis on January 21st. Bovino had stated a day earlier that ICE operations were lawful and that they're targeted and they're focused on individuals who pose a serious threat to this community. Thank you. I will now pass things off to Stephanie Hyman.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to run us through the published version of these four stories that Ron and I worked at the New Republic, and then we will be looking at a few more videos from Ron. So let me go ahead and share my screen for a start. This is the first video.
Get back! Get back now! I'm in the gas! Get back! Gas is coming! Gas is coming! Get out of here! Fucking fascist! Get back!
So I'm going to walk us through these published pieces by reading the text, and then showing the imagery. So this article, and also talking a little bit about the background about how Ron and I came to um, produce these stories together. He had reached out to me and said he wanted to go to Minneapolis and he thought something was going to happen. And we agreed that it was a good time for him to, we weren't really sure what he was going to see, but that he started to photograph. And that's pretty much how things unfolded in Minneapolis. And I will read this and then we will look at the pictures. Despite sub-zero temperatures, the people of Minneapolis have come out in force to protest ICE brutal tactics, which include the killing of Renee Nicole Good and detaining a 5-year-old boy to bait his parents. Photojournalist Ron Haviv covered more than 25 overseas conflicts in the last 3 decades, from wars to revolutions to coups d'etats. He documented January 6th raid on the Capitol and the start of the war in Ukraine for the New Republic. For the past week, he had been on the streets of downtown Minneapolis, capturing the resistance to immigration and customs enforcement. Here he shares his perspective. And Ron, did you want to read this out loud, this part?
Sure, I can do that. This needs to be documented, but at the same time, the administration wants these images to be seen. They want people to see that they are doing what they said they would do. Second, they want it to create motivation for self-deportation. It's a very complicated formula. This expansion of ICE in terms of budget, personnel, and territory is shocking for many people to witness, especially their mass presence and their weapons. Immigration policy is in black and white. In some areas, there's agreement with what they are doing, in others, total opposition. But adding an element of cruelty when things could be handled better doesn't make sense. I photographed under dictators societies on the cusp of breakup and outright invasion. One of the closest comparisons I see in terms of class, economics, and values is the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s. People talked about it being a conflict over religion, but it was really about power and money, convincing people that those who were different were the enemy. That led to years of war. We are not there yet, but when rhetoric is backed by armed force, that's how escalation begins. We're starting to get used to the visualization of militarization on the streets. It feels like this is only going to increase. There's no de-escalation. Minnesota is becoming a standard for activist reaction to ICE deployment.
On January 20, outside the building where Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino held a press conference, a protester holds a homemade poster with drawing of Bovino and an ICE officer giving a Nazi salute. It reads, "Meet Greg Bovino, lies under oath. Reports to Kristi Noem. All uses of force have been more than exemplary." A protester holds up a sign that reads, "Hey Nazi, cold. Scared? Quit your job," while giving an unmarked vehicle the middle finger. A Minneapolis resident gives Bovino and his entourage of ICE agents the middle finger after they stopped for gas and pepper sprayed the crowd that surrounded them. An ICE agent pepper sprays people while one protester gives him the finger at a gas station. A protester after being pepper sprayed by ICE agents. An anti-ICE protester screams during a protest outside the Bishop Henry Whipple Federal Building. A protester holds a spiral notebook with a page open that reads "No Nazis" in black marker. Jake Lang left, who organized an anti-Islam, anti-Somali, and pro-ICE demonstration in downtown Minneapolis on January 17, is confronted by counter-protesters. ICE agents push a protester. A protester holds up a sign next to a police vehicle that reads, "ICE has been violating my neighbor's constitutional rights." The entrance sign for the Bishop Henry Whipple Federal Building altered with spray paint graffiti to read, "Pigs entry only." A large memorial for Renee Nicole Good with multiple homemade posters, signs, and flowers covered by snow. ICE agents tackle a protester. A poster taped on a pole. Masked ICE agents gather outside the Bishop Henry Whipple Federal Building. A woman stands by a street intersection in a blizzard wearing an anti-ice sign. A man at a protest inside a Minneapolis Target store that holds a sign that reads, "Abolish ICE." Graffiti on a concrete ledge reads, "Fuck you, feds. Fuck ICE." Bovino and his team leave an interview at a local Minneapolis TV station on January 20. A homemade sign at Renee Good's memorial reads, "Untrump the world, love instead." And that's the last of this article. And then we're going to skip 5 years back to the next story that we worked on, or a story we worked on, which was January 6 protests. Ron, do you want to talk a moment about how you came to find yourself in that position and how the story unfolded before I show it?
Sure. There was at that point the conversation about the election, whether it was legitimate or not, was well underway. There's a lot of tension, and the country seemed somewhat divided on who actually had won more in conversation than the actual numbers, even though obviously, of course, the election also was very close between Biden and Trump. And so Trump called for a rally um, on for January 21st. There was a number of different things that he said that made it seem like this was going to be a rally that could get out of control, that he was kind of whipping up a frenzy through rhetoric the day before. And so I thought it was worthwhile to go. So I went to DC to prepare the day before. And one of the first things you do is you kind of go to understand what's going to happen in the place. So you go to look at what's going on. So I went to the Capitol and was amazed to see that there was literally no fencing, very few police presence the day before. I thought that was a little bit strange. It seemed like they weren't really somebody was not listening to what Trump was saying, just to even like be overly protective of the Capitol and the area where the rally was taking place, which was on the grounds where the Washington Monument is. And the next day, thousands of people descended, families, a mix of families, a mix of Proud Boys, uh, all sorts of different right-wing groups, as well as just traditional Republicans and people that supported President Trump, mixed together, listening to various speakers who were also basically at that point saying that the election was illegal, that this was incorrect, and that what was about to happen in the Capitol that day was that they were going to certify the election, and that that couldn't be allowed to happen without really sort of specifying what the possible thing to do was. But as you kind of walked around and you saw that there were different groups, especially kind of these militarized groups like the Proud Boys and others who were talking to each other on radios, who were wearing military fatigues, I didn't see anybody carrying weapons at that point. I actually never saw anybody carrying weapons at all during that day. But there seemed to be an underlying idea of organization among the masses. And after, or actually, I heard that while Trump was speaking to the crowd, eventually he came out, that the crowd was starting to move towards that limited fencing at the Capitol. And so I arrived just as they were breaking through kind of the first line of defense, which was again a mix of the militarized Proud Boys and others, as well as people, and the crowd just kind of surged forward towards the Capitol, and I just followed them in, and I was one of the few photographers who were at the window at 2:12. I think it was 2:12 p.m. that day when they had broken through the various lines, pushed back the police. They broke the windows and they were able to then get into the Capitol. And then they opened up the doors, and then the mob was able to get inside.
Mhm. I want to say that from a publication perspective, I'm pretty sure, Ron, that you'd called me the day before and you'd said, "Are you interested in covering this?" And I said, "It sounds like a protest. I'm not sure I am committed to covering a protest." But at the moment that you were, I guess, or right after you had gone in through the Capitol, your agent, Marcel Saba, called me and said, "Ron's inside the Capitol building. Do you want to guarantee this now?" And I said, yes, I do actually, because I'm watching it on television too. So what unfolded next from a media perspective was really extraordinary because for a hard news event, there were no video cameras or teams inside. And all of the photographers who'd been there before under like accredited by Capitol had left in advance of the mob arriving. So none of us could see what was happening inside. The only person who really could was the photojournalist, and Ron, being intrepid, was one of the very first. So um, the day progressed, and then from my side, we weren't in touch until about 10 p.m., I think that night.
Yeah, probably quite late.
Yeah, and you send me the pictures. And I didn't even know what I was looking at necessarily at this point. And I felt that again when I watched the video that we're going to show right after this. So Ron and I were on the phone and we did this very quickly so that I could push out this story the next morning. And it was for the New Republic, it was really one of the stories that went viral because nobody in America or the world had been able to glimpse inside what was happening at this point, and not even so much on social media 5 years ago, right, Ron?
Yeah, to a large extent. I mean, it was
Yeah.
going, they themselves, the protesters, were also posting snippets and so on, but it was very hard to, if you didn't follow them, you wouldn't even see it. So it was hard
Yeah,
to
not a
understand what was
big
happening.
picture story.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I'm gonna run through this. This is not too long, and then we're gonna show a video that Ron made. And one of the things we were discussing yesterday, in terms of the production of this type of photo essay for an online publication, we also do print, but clearly we don't include a hard news in print. Um, is that this edit is very loose and just a immediate response to what was happening. And then the video you did, Ron, is a much more sort of thoughtful edit with the photography and the music. And so it has a little bit more of like the immediacy of a hard news event, which is we see here, and how it translates into something a little bit more historical, perhaps, right?
Yes.
Okay. So um, Ron Haviv, who once covered a coup attempt in Panama, followed rioters through a broken window into the seat of his own nation's legislative branch. And we talk about Ron. Because this is actually a very easy way to start. But here we go. One of his first international assignments was covering the 1989 coup attempt in Panama. So when he watched President Trump order his fever pitch mob of supporters to walk down to the Capitol on Wednesday to somehow correct the egregious assault on our democracy involved in counting and certifying votes, Haviv could gauge better than most what might happen next. I kind of did imagine that if everything went wrong, I could see them getting into the Capitol. He told me, this is our reporter Bob Moser, by phone on Wednesday evening. But I didn't see it as easy as it turned out to be. Why would you think that? It just seems ridiculous. This is the United States government. But it only took an hour or so for rioters answering the call of their mad overlord to push back the Capitol Police and start ramming their way into the building. Haviv spotted a group of a dozen or so climbing the scaffolding of the inaugural stand being built for January 20 and headed towards a window. I went with the moment, he said, and climbed in with them. The scaffolding was all the protection there was. They were getting pepper sprayed and some flash bombs, but didn't really stop them. We have a video here, but we're going to see the video after this, so I'm going to skip over this part. When the group found themselves inside, there was more of a sense of confusion than of purpose. We're in, what now? They had expected a lot more to follow them, Haviv said. They just didn't know what to do. There was no leadership, there was no plan. Also, there was no target. They weren't saying, we're going to get Pence or McConnell. Just, we're going in, it's ours. You let Black Lives Matter do whatever they want, and this is what we want to do. Later, after the initial group emerged into a fog of smoke from the late amassing police, Haviv followed a second group of 10 or so back in. His images showed the jagged, chaotic, and raw nature of the attempt to steal America for Donald Trump, the fervent futility of what transpired inside the Capitol. As they charged the Capitol, rioters sprayed what Haviv called was orange-colored liquid at the increasingly overmatched Capitol Police. It's our house, we want justice, some hollered. Police tried to deter the marauders with pepper spray and flash bombs just outside the Capitol. If people actually had known what they were doing, Haviv said, actually had some plans, the police would have obviously been overwhelmed more quickly and thoroughly. The first group of about a dozen to breach the building climbed the inaugural scaffolding, mounted a set of stairs, and smashed through the window. As amazed as anyone else that they were just able to keep going forward. Inside the Capitol, federal police attempted to prevent additional rioters from entering through the broken window. The first intruders encountered just one Capitol Police officer who tried to hold them off alone before fleeing to the second floor, where the House and Senate chambers are located, to join his colleagues. The mob followed. Once they'd broken in, the rioters would have lost to what to do next. This guy is ransacking an office on the Senate side for no reason, Haviv said, while other people yell at him for ransacking. A Trump supporter stopped for arrest during the melee next to a bust of Richard Nixon. Earlier, Haviv saw the man snatch the police flak jacket he's wearing, along with the shield, gear left by the police outside. A second wave of rioters entered the Capitol, having cheerfully helped Haviv with his media badge through the window. I was surprised that they didn't realize that they were committing crimes and that we were photographing them. On the second floor, in a room said to have been occupied by 15 minutes earlier by Secret Service officers, QAnon conspirator Jake Angeli took stock with a look of awe of where he is, Haviv said. They're in a place where they don't belong, and they don't know what to do now that they're there. Police moved in to clear the Capitol grounds at last around dusk. That's the beginning of how they're ending it, Haviv said. By 6 p.m. curfew in Washington, D.C., riot police has surrounded the period at the Capitol by Bob Moser. Um, do we want to go to the video next?
Sure.
All right, so I'll turn off my screen share now, right, Austin?
Are you guys getting a screen share? Sorry, I think it said it
Yeah.
closed. Hold on. Let me just do desktop. Sorry.
Keep it moving!
This will never end. It will never end until we have justice and every fucking state is orderly. We will not stop. We will continue.
Justice is coming, baby! Freedom!
Can't control your people. Can't control my people.
What's the last sentence of the First Amendment? Can you talk to the people in that room? You guys stop tear gas. You guys stop shooting. As soon as you back off the camera, guarantee 100% tear gas.
Okay, so I'm taking over this share screen again, and we're going to go to the next chapter. We're back, flashing forward now a few years to 2024, and Ron was covering the RNC and the DNC during that summer for the Republic, and the assassination attempt of Donald Trump happened just before the RNC. So, Ron, do you want to talk about that for a moment?
Well, the RNC, that's the Republican National Convention, where they're going to officially nominate Donald Trump for their candidate to be president, along with JD Vance as vice president. And these things are often very flashy, very produced, very kind of like a circus slash Broadway show. I've done about 10 of these or so, maybe a little bit more over the years, both Republican and Democrat. And there's a lot of similarities between the two at most times. But this, given the fervor for Trump, given the assassination attempt, became not only more like a coronation, um, but also kind of a mystical, somewhat for many people, kind of religious experience of this man who God had chosen to come in and save the world, certainly to save the United States. And so, Steph, why don't you talk about how you came up with this idea about the mega
Right.
church and so on?
So, I mean, looking at the images from the assassination itself, assassination attempt itself, um, and and listening to the rhetoric around that. I mean, it certainly sounded and was proposed that there had been a miracle and that God had saved Trump from assassination, and it certainly was a close call. However, the images, I think what happened in this case is that, Ron, you were sending me the images every day. And every night I looked at it and I was like, oh, okay, well, and we've worked on RNCs and DNCs before. So these can be very repetitive looking. Um, but this one was a little bit different because of the injury to Trump's ear. And I started to think when I received, once I had all the images as a batch, and it was sort of the last night, I decided that I was going to edit these and thematically, and a little bit more conceptually than I would for most news forward photo essays. So instead of having captions, which you'll see, well, I organize the series, which is a little bit more of a fine art conceit, and I group it into different parts that follow the Catholic Mass. So the Republican Party has long interwoven Christian themes in its political messaging, but this week's GOP convention took it to a new level. Milwaukee's Fearsome Forum resembled a megachurch full of revivalists more than the arena of politicos. Donald Trump, of course, was the divinely chosen figure who just last weekend experienced a miracle when the shooter's bullet grazed his ear. On Thursday night, the Republican Party's savior gave a stern, stem-winding sermon to his congregation, many with napkins taped to their ears in devotion, who responded with blessings and prayers. Praise be. Photographer Ron Haviv captured it all for the New Republic. A slew of religious speakers referenced Trump's miraculous survival, suggesting it was all part of God's plan. He said, "This makes a case of Trump as a deity. The party is made in his image," he said. And after the divine intervention of last week, Trump's devotees believe his second coming is assured. They might have been hopeful before, but now they absolutely believe they are going to win. And the first section is the Beatitudes. And I think I'm going to scroll slowly through these. Followed by the creed. And to me, a lot of the creed was section is indicated visually by the signage. And then there's the ear. The disciples all make an appearance. And the congregation. And that is the end of this one. We have no video for this, so I'm going to move. Do we want to say anything else about this, Ron, or should we go next to No Kings?
Well, it's a perfect kind of segue into No Kings because, obviously now when you're looking at the polling and so on, there's certainly probably a lot of those people who were, so supportive and enthusiastic have lost a lot of their enthusiasm in the last year and a half or so. There's this, I think one of the things, we freeze these moments in time in photography. It represents what we were seeing at the time, but also the power of photography has this ability to kind of ensure that we think about what we once thought, what we're thinking today, and how things have changed. It's quite interesting. And so it's a good move into No Kings as the country starts to gather itself in terms of protest.
Yeah. So we're going to start. There's a couple of things I want to say before we talk about this story. First, I wanted to point out that we thought about what stories to show you guys, and we wanted to start with the most recent Minneapolis, which is sort of our most recent national news experience, and then to flash back to kind of where we were 5 years ago with the January 6th. Then coming, like, how did we get back? How did we get here? And what is the path that we're going on? So if we see the RNC next, and now we come to the start of the protests and the No Kings against Trump. It's a very interesting look at how we start to evolve from, again, a shared immediate like news event into something that becomes historic and how history is made. And I feel that the role of the photojournalist in this is very critically important because there's so many forces that are vying for truth, the truth seeker, or like who gets to define what is the truth, especially in something like January 6th at this point, which is being spun so much. So the work of the photojournalist is really one of our primary sources, especially for historical record. So in this story, I do have 5 photographers covering the first of the No Kings protests last summer. And I'm only going to show Ron's. So Ron's is from Los Angeles, but I do want to acknowledge everybody else who covered this event for the New Republic. Ron, do you want to talk about how you decided to go out to Los Angeles first? Because that was the region that you covered as far as this article.
I wanted to go to the beach.
Yeah.
So no, I had not. I hadn't worked
I
in
bet
Los
you had time for that.
Angeles. Yeah, I hadn't worked in Los Angeles, and there was a lot of talk about escalating the militarization of the government response, which eventually happened with the deployment of the National Guard and actual U.S. Marines. So it was all part of kind of the continued escalation of the response to the Trump administration, plus the beach.
plus a beach. Do you also want to mention just, I think that a lot of people aren't so aware of how dangerous it has become to be in or cover protests in the United States in perhaps like say the last 5 years, six.
Well, I think Los Angeles is probably a good example, even though it's happened before, where journalists are being targeted by various military responses. But I think in LA, over the course of No King's Day and the previous protests, No King's Day and the post protests, I think there was over 100 journalists, including photographers, that were hurt, that were injured, shot by not only by well, actually not even by so much. It's really not the Marines or the National Guard who didn't fire any weapons, but the LAPD and the sheriff's department working in conjunction actually with ICE, in a weird way when they were not supposed to, given that California is a sanctuary or Los Angeles is a sanctuary city. But there's video of one dramatic one that maybe people saw, of a reporter from an Australian TV station doing a stand-up in a relatively very quiet moment. Everybody's just kind of standing around. She's talking to camera, and behind her, you see a policeman raise his weapon and shoot her with what's known as a less than lethal um, munition, which is quite painful, as I was also shot myself during that protest. And it's just kind of like very obvious that she was media, that I was media, yet we are becoming targets. On the flip side, to some credit, to some degree, in Minneapolis, for the most part, the media was allowed to work as long as we were not interfering with operations and so on. So it's kind of a, I don't think the administration's really kind of figured out exactly what they're doing, but like I wrote or said in the Minnesota piece, they do want these images to be seen because they want there to be fear of what's happening. At the same time, there are also people that just want that are angry at the media, whether it's officers in terms of LA and the LAPD or the sheriff's department, or people in ICE. So it's confusing, but without question, the bottom line is that it's a little bit more dangerous than it used to be.
Mhm. Um, do you want to introduce this short clip? We have 44 seconds.
This is just a clip of protesters, hands up in the air, not really doing much, and occupying the street, and then being tear gassed by by a mix of different military forces. Yeah,
Okay,
from
I'm going to
police
go in
to
and play this now, and then I'll run through your photographs, and then we go to another video. Okay. All
yeah.
right.
Peaceful protest! 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 Peaceful protest!
Sorry. Okay. Saturday was an extraordinary and troubling day in American politics as President Donald Trump threw an unprecedented military parade to celebrate the U.S. Army's and his own birthday in Washington, D.C. As many as 5 million people in the country participated in the equally historic No Kings protests against him. The New Republic sent 5 photographers, Aaron Agato, Paolo Champlain, Ron Haviv, Jesse Ian Kornbluth, and Henry Villarama to cover these events. From small conservative towns in Libby, Montana, Hendersonville, North Carolina, and Spartanville, South Carolina, to big blue cities in DC, New York City, and Los Angeles. Here's what they observed. Do you want to read this?
Sure. I
Yeah.
began the day with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Unsure of what would come next, No King's protest was set to take place at City Hall in Los Angeles, where in the days prior, a combination of peaceful demonstrations, violent clashes, and heightened emotions had gripped the city and the country. Thousands arrived, some dressed in red, white, and blue, waving flags from the US, Mexico, El Salvador, and other Latin American countries. These flags were handed out, sold, and held high throughout the crowd. Speeches echoed through the plaza, stirring emotions and reminding everyone why they had gathered. I saw sadness, anger, and determination etched into the faces, white, brown, and black. Eventually, the crowd began to march through downtown as some peeled off to go home. Others moved towards the nearby federal detention center guarded by U.S. Marines, National Guard troops, Homeland Security officers, and others. The protesters pressed forward, taunting the lines of security, but remaining peaceful. As their numbers swelled, the LA County Sheriff's Department, LAPD, moved in to clear the streets. I saw as officers formed lines and began firing tear gas and rubber bullets into the crowd. Protesters and journalists were equally targeted as the authorities advanced on a defiant though shrinking mass of people. I stood watching as the sun set and the 8 p.m. curfew took effect, largely ignored. The standoff continued into the night. I heard the chants persist, saw the projectiles flying through the air. Neither side seemed willing to let the other have the final word.
Okay, I'm going to stop the share now. And Austin, if you want to go to video. And I think, meanwhile, again, it's sort of worth. There's two things I want to say about how I am showing the New Republic work. It's that over a period of time, 5 years, like our
Since
technologies.
taking office, my administration has launched the
Oh, okay. I'll just finish
Stephanie,
that
if you
thought.
want to keep going, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just finish that thought. The optimization is now sort of set up to be on an iPhone, since iPhone or mobile phones, because 80% of people receive their news on phones now and not on desktop. So it's a little bit hard now to move those proportions into a desktop style presentation. And also that I'm going very as fast as I can to get the stuff out and publish it. It's a race against social media a lot of times. So the video we're about to see again is it's a much more thoughtful and edit of the body of work that Ron's been doing the last few years. All right, I'm ready.
Since taking office, my administration has launched the most sweeping border and immigration crackdown in American history, and we quickly achieved the lowest numbers of illegal border crossers ever recorded. Thank you. The media and our friends in the Democrat Party kept saying we needed new legislation, we must have legislation to secure the border. But it turned out that all we really needed was a new president. Thank you. Joe Biden didn't just open our borders, he flew illegal aliens over them to overwhelm our schools, hospitals, and communities throughout the country. Now, just as I promised in my inaugural address, we are achieving the great liberation of America. But there still is much work to be done.
Where's your honor? My body! Get back!
Shame on you! Who the fuck are you? Why won't you even look me in the eye? I'm from the north, but we the people ain't broken. Yeah, all day in Minnesota, no more pretending.
Related to a van, we can sneak around town, hunting working folks down. I hear they got a great benefit plan. Join ICE, boy, ain't it nice? Join ICE, take my advice. If you like control and authority, come with me and hunt down minorities. Join ICE. Well, I failed the academy, the cops weren't having me, the army didn't sound that fun, so I found me a paramilitary operation that was keen to hand me a gun. I got picked on in school, I never felt that cool. There's a hole in my soul that just rages.
And that's, I think, the end of our presentation. So we still have some time for some questions, Lana.
So if you have questions, just raise your hand, or you could just start to speak.
How can they speak?
Oh, raise your hand. Oh, it has to be Christy. Christy will unmute you. Christy, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, Christy
I
will
think,
unmute you. Yes.
yeah, I think they may be able to unmute themselves too, but feel free to raise your hand, and if Alana can call on you, that would be great.
Christy, I can't unmute them. You're the host.
I understand they can unmute themselves, but I'll do it if they can't. So
Or
who
they
would
can
like to speak?
type a question into the chat also if they want.
That's a great idea.
Well, we're waiting for questions just to kind of sort of wrap this up. I think this is with the work that I'm doing, my colleagues are doing, Stephanie's doing, and other publications and media are doing, is like we're playing our role in trying to inform all of you, whether you're here in the United States or outside the country, about what's going on, and to be paying attention, especially for the United States as we move into an election where decisions need to be made that will have actual impact on the ground. So this question about what will happen next, I think we're seeing yesterday or 2 days ago, a federal appeals court declared that the Trump policy of closing the border to asylum seekers was actually illegal. Most likely they're going to appeal that to the Supreme Court, but the judiciary is actually trying in some ways, at least up to the point of the Supreme Court, trying to ensure that much of what's happening is looked at properly and declared legal or illegal. For instance, I showed you some pictures of ICE guys in this last piece from Federal Plaza in New York, where they're detaining people without due process and so on. They've been doing that for months. That was just declared illegal by another court, is also being appealed. So it's a hard to answer what's going to happen next, but I think as being the administration, are going to continue these policies as much as they can. There's another militarization force that's being created that will be launched probably by the fall, kind of a more rapid reaction force than exists today. The budget for ICE and for the Department of Defense has never been as large as ever. So these are things to pay attention to. And we also see that in, let's say, for instance, in Europe, who also has very strict, and in some cases, much more strict policies on immigration than the United States, they're being inspired by what's going on here to deal with their own, what they call their own immigration problems. So this is not just an American only issue. This is something that is um, continuing not only here, but around the world. And so the first thing for any citizen of any country to do is to be informed. And that's the role that Stephanie and I play. It's a small role, but it's part of it. But you also have to play your role by actually paying attention to what's out there.
I also want to add that knowing your source is really important, and not just in, I want to speak especially to the younger people who are watching this program. Being aware of where you're seeing your information and who they are. So this is important to look at if you're receiving it on social media, if you're receiving it on TikTok, if you're receiving it, where are they getting this source material? The New Republic is a biased publication. We are left of left in our politics. So this is, and even though you can see that some of that bias comes through in the way that some of our reporting is done. And taking it back again one step directly, like for example, to the work that Ron is doing as a direct witness, is also an important way to know how you're receiving your information. And I do think again, like that's why being able to look at photojournalism, which is the one genre of photography that is governed by ethics, and knowing that your source photographer is a very useful way to help guide what is objectively real.
To respond to a question more about the aesthetics by Robert Brush about my choice in the last piece of black and white. And also, if you noticed, different formats, it wasn't 35 millimeter format, but square and panoramic. And that's a deliberate choice. It's really actually the way that I would prefer to see the work. New Republic wanted more color, so Stephanie's paying, so Stephanie gets to choose the way that it's displayed. But I chose that because I thought it was more unifying to bring us all together kind of under one. The colors I think can be very disparate. And I wanted to kind of have the gravitas of the black and white and the different formats of something a little bit different than at least that I normally see the world was enabling me, I think, to tell a different, slightly different story. Not completely different. The end result would be the same in color, but I think the aesthetics were for me a little bit more powerful that way.
I want to add to that in the context in which I'm showing the work, which is news, I generally will default to color because I want people to experience it as news that's happening now.
Simone, do you have a question?
Yeah, it's a question for both of you in a way, with each of your angles, one from the publishing side and one as the photographer on the ground. I'm a photojournalist and I've done a lot of migrant justice type stuff and also anti-deportation raids, those kind of things, and locally the racist valleys outside asylum hotels. And so frequently have issues with the police and what I can and can't do. So, and also then obviously with local union chapters, and because I came late to it in life, I've not got connections like you have. But what is the situation legally, and that you could so easily accept Ron essentially trespassing? I mean, I followed a group of students into university building and for their shutdown and documented and was the only photographer inside and did so as a freelancer. But that has sort of implications when you're not well connected. So what is your freedom in relation to that, to kind of essentially jointly breaking the law or trespassing, or is it different in the States to the UK?
Well, that's important. Like each country has their own laws, and so quite often American photographers go overseas and think the laws that apply in America apply in the UK or somewhere else, and often they don't. So I can't really speak about, I don't know the laws in the UK enough, but the laws here, if you if you're a working photographer, and the definition of working photographer has become very broad. If you're posting on social media and you have an audience, you can be considered a working journalist, right? You're communicating. They don't determine you're a journalist if you're communicating to 100 people versus 1,000 people. And so we're allowed through our own laws to be able to follow news events from happening that don't put you into the same uh, peril that a protester who's chaining themselves to a door or trespassing. But at the same time, if a law enforcement person here in the States comes to you and says you're trespassing and you need to leave, you're going to be pretty limited on your ability on what you can do. So it's often just kind of looking for those moments where you can kind of go in, slip in, document, at the same time don't wind up getting, because even if you get, often journalists, if they get arrested here, they'll wind up being released, but you wind up spending, I haven't been arrested here like that, but you wind up getting, spending a lot of time dealing with paperwork and so on. So a lot of it's kind of paying attention and so on, knowing the laws, and also state laws versus federal laws are different here. So it's up to each photographer to understand exactly what they can do and what they can't do. But generally, the Constitution is still allowing free press, and that does have very broad implications as much as this administration is trying to curtail them. But in the UK, I wouldn't be able to
Yeah,
reflect.
thanks for that. I mean, in the UK, there was, especially with me personally, was a degree of misogyny as well, because they seem to allow free press for all their social media, those racist social media auditors or whatever they call themselves, who
Right.
didn't even have a press pass. Whereas with me, they seemed, but hopefully I've sorted it locally, at least with a local force, a bit more after a meeting. But it's really interesting to hear that take, but also see that courage of that following and that instinct of documenting and then responding to any requests from law enforcement on your part. Thank you.
I also think that whenever you have a credential around your neck, whether issued by an actual organization or just issued stating that you're a working journalist, that's laminated in hard plastic with a photograph, a stamp, and a date, goes a long way to allowing the authorities to say, "Oh, that person's already been vetted," and it's amazing the difference that it will make versus somebody
However,
that has
you're a
no credit.
white male person speaking, or at least to law enforcement, whereas I'm a woman and a migrant in
I
this country.
understand, but I've seen the same thing with women as well. I think just kind of anything
Right.
that makes you think that they think you're professional enables you to, even if you're not considering yourself personally professional, but anything that kind of fits the profile often opens up doors that you might not think will open up. That's all.
Could I interject? There was a question I wanted to follow up and ask Ron. Have you received threats for your work?
For the work here, no. For work overseas, yes. But not here yet. But that's, we're seeing what's happening. The Washington Post reporter and other people, it's changing and it's becoming more difficult. It's kind of very interesting in that the power of photography is quite powerful, and people often refer to photographs, and it's a big deal. But in cases of threats and trying to control, here at least, they don't respect the genre of photography, and photographers are often going to be the last people that are harassed, which is kind of a weird
It is.
dichotomy.
That's interesting. I would say that at the New Republic, well, we published a very controversial cover uh, that ended up, well, it was probably 2 months before the assassination attempt, but it was sort of grabbed again after the assassination attempt as part of like the left's wanting to politicize in a negative way. Violence. And we all had a lot of direct threats, yes. To the point where I asked, to have my email taken off of our website. I did not want that. More questions?
So
Why don't you just scroll, Stephanie, and choose something if you want?
Mm,
don't see any. Ron, I have a question. Um, in your articles, you make comparisons, or writers have made comparisons to violent episodes you've covered overseas. And I'm wondering now, as things have been changing here in the US, how what are different choices you make that you wouldn't have made in the past if you're going to a protest or going to hear speaker? Like, what are some choices that you didn't think you'd have to make here that you might be making here now?
Well, I think one of the biggest battles now, and this started with Black Lives Matter and is just increasing, is that there's a real debate about photographing people's faces that are protesters, and or who are you working for? If I like who you're working for, you can work freely. If you don't, we're going to remove you or physically harm you or so on. That's become um, a big difference, kind of coverage in the streets, and it is a constant battle that's increasing. Simultaneously, of course, everybody is filming each other, and they don't seem to realize that whatever they're posting is winding up visually available to anybody, regardless of whatever side they're on, and also the fact that when they're protesting in many places, like in many countries, there are so many surveillance cameras and the police are coming with cameras that everybody is being filmed. And but they seem to be able to focus their energy and dismay on the working photographer because we're standing there. It's a problem, and it makes it more difficult and less likely for us often to want to go and document what they're protesting about if it's not possible to document what they're protesting, to document the protests.
I wanted to just also mention for Andrew that I just wanted to go back for a sec, I guess, and say that when you were shot in Los Angeles, Ron, that was just to clarify, that was a rubber bullet and not live ammunition.
It was a less than lethal 40 millimeter. It was, yeah, it was not really rubber,
Still
more than
hurt,
worse than a rubber bullet, but certainly nowhere near an actual bullet. Yeah,
right?
correct.
Would you either of you like to address any more of the question that came from Andrew? He wrote, thank you so much, Ron and Stephanie. Firstly, I want to ask you about the psychological side of working as a photojournalist. How do you process personal trauma? And then he asked,
Um, yeah, I think it's everybody deals with what's now, which is referred to as PTSD in a certain way. PTSD was once a very hidden thing in the world of journalism, the kind of cliche of the war journalist after the war being, becoming an alcoholic or a drug addict and so on was often because there was no way for people to be able to process their experiences. That's changed dramatically since the mid 1990s. So there's a lot of help, professional help that's out there. There are a lot of lessons to learn to be able to deal with it better. And I think for myself, certainly having suffered from this, one of the best um, ways to basically accept and understand why I'm doing what I'm doing is when I'm able to see the reaction of the work that I'm doing. When it has significance, when it has impact, it rationalizes everything for me. If I was just kind of out there working year after year and nobody was paying attention to my work, even though I was exposing myself to very difficult situations, I think it would be much harder to move forward. But I've been lucky enough to see the impact of my work, lucky enough to do things like this with Generation Human Rights and others to have conversations about the work and listen to or read comments that are being posted. Um, so when you know you're having an effect, it for me it definitely helps.
thank you. I don't see any more questions in the chat. Oh, Madison, go ahead.
I have a question, just sort of touching on what you just said. I was wondering how, I guess for you personally, when you were dealing with such heavy topics and kind of such a broad career, how do you personally measure or I guess just think about things like impact or success in your field? Like, how would you kind of conceptualize those things?
It can be, there's not an amazing amount of work out there that can actually impact people's strangers' lives. This is one of them. And it can be something as simply as here's what's happening in Sudan. I now motivated somebody to reach into their pocket and donate $10 to Medicine Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, which will then impact maybe not that particular person that was photographed, but that community. That already is like amazing, amazing impact, I think. The ability to give people the tools and understanding in conversation, and when they go into a voting booth, to be able to understand who they're voting for and what they represent, to understand vote this way, this will happen, vote that way, that will happen. That is also incredibly powerful. And then I've had also the opportunity with some of my work to um, of real conflict. To the work was used to indict and convict people of war crimes. So that's kind of being kind of at the sort of top end, not a very normal thing, but something that the work was able to do is to have real impact in helping give people justice. But even if it doesn't go to the point of war crimes, many people, many victims, just to note that people are paying attention to their story, that people are being um, aware of it, and hopefully, obviously, the end result of something being done about it is incredibly important. I did a presentation last night with a colleague named Giles Clark, who did some work in Yemen that was very dramatic. And Bernie Sanders printed one of the photographs and brought it to the floor of the Senate and used that as a talking point of why are we supporting the war in Yemen. And I've had that. My work has been displayed in Congress from Congo and other places. So it's all this idea of us being able to and it's a chain from myself to Stephanie to publish, from the reader of the New Republic to do something, from my work being seen in other ways, social media and so on, for people to do something. We're handing it off. It's not the end when the work is done. It's just the beginning. And again, it's this idea of your responsibility as a consumer of imagery, a consumer of news, making sure that you're looking at vetted, properly captioned in work done with integrity and ethics and so on. That once you know it's true, it's not just sort of in this sort of chamber of lies that also exists now in social. And you take it where you are, and then you talk to your friends or your children or your parents and so on, and that has continued impact. But without impact, this is very difficult. But sometimes the impact is not immediate, but eventually it does come. So all this work on ice, which has definitely had impact, and documenting the bravery of the people of Minnesota and so on, had that immediate effect and was part of it. But all of this stuff that's being declared illegal, we have now the journalistic representation of all that. So eventually, let's say with Alex Preddy and Renee Good, those people that were involved in that will be arrested, and the work will be part of that. The visuals will be part of their case at some point.
And I just want to add to that, just as an educator, and there are many educators on this call today. We have the opportunity then to share this work in our lesson plans and open up discussions in our classrooms. And that's yet another way that this work has impact, because our students then can ask good questions, do investigation, investigate, research, and then make decisions later in life or even currently in life based on what they're seeing and hearing from these reports from the front lines.
And that's exactly why the Seven Foundation has partnered with Generation Human Rights over the course of the years, because it's something we greatly believe in. And yeah, I should have added that because it is actually one of the most important things that this work can do. Because we want to educate the next generation to be able to make the right decisions and be informed with this type of work and understand, as much of it is a cliche, history repeats itself. So what they're learning about that happened before they were born, most likely some version of that will happen again while they're alive, and then they'll have some ability to have impact with it. So the more knowledge that they have about the history of the world and what's going on today, the better they will be able to represent themselves in the future.
Thank you. Austin, do you have a question?
Ron Haviv, photojournalist.
I did have a question for Ron, actually. I was curious since I was seeing in the background of the video for the LA No Kings protests, one of the journalists was wearing a gas mask and was kind of ducking, tear gas. So, as a journalist, how do you keep yourself safe physically when you're at one of these protests? Like, what kind of tactics do you use? What kind of things do you wear? That kind of thing.
Ron, you're mute.
Over the years, as more journalists were being targeted and becoming more wounded and more killed, there became this idea about training journalists how to survive in conflicts such as protests, war zones, and so on. So there are courses that are given to freelancers and staffers on how to work in these situations. So that's the first thing you do. And the second is that you go with the proper equipment, flak jackets for bullets, gas masks for gas, and so on.
And eye protection.
And eye protection, of course, yeah.
Okay. So are there any more questions? Ron and Stephanie, do you want to say anything in closing?
I'm good.
Yeah. Well, we want to thank everybody for coming today. This was really great. And thank you for hanging out with us for that extra 20 minutes for this in-depth discussion. And we really appreciate it. And you all should have at least the Generation Human Rights email, because we emailed you back with the RSVP information. So if you have any further questions for anyone, feel free to just send a note. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All the best.